Welcome back to Between Meetings. This is our second of the series after our brilliant colleague Andy Windybank talked about his fostering journey a few weeks ago. I'm super excited to be joined in what is a piping hot cauldron in Datchet today by not one but two group directors. We have Ben here, who's our Group Performance Director, and also Amanda, our Group Culture and Engagement Director. Did I get both of your titles right, first of all?
You did.
Perfect. Smashed it. As you may have already guessed, today we're going to be exploring why culture and performance belong in the same conversation. So I'm going to kick off with you, Ben, if that's all right. So you've been here a few months now. How long have you been here?
I think I'm approaching month 4.
Month 4. So what I'm interested in is what struck you most about Atlas's culture and how does it connect to performance?
I think we have a great culture. I think it was really attractive. Sort of talking to Chris and to yourself and a few of the other kind of leaders across the business before I joined, it's delightful to see that what was sort of the price of Atlas is what I'm now experiencing. And, I think Amanda and I would both say that, culture isn't a one-time thing. There's continued work and effort going into maintaining culture that we've built, kind of further delivering that throughout the organization. But what a great foundation we've got. I think given the role that I do and the strapline of culture plus performance equals unstoppable, it was great to see an organization that was really putting its money where its mouth is. And so having Amanda sitting at the kind of top table of our leadership, bringing in a role such as mine to complement that. And I think both of us will say probably a number of times today that it really is a compliment. Culture plus performance is really the magic that we want to drive forward. And I think we have a huge amount of opportunity at the performance space. We've done so much work on culture, delivering the Atlas Way and all of the work that Amanda and the wider organization have done to drive our cultural agenda. I think we now have an opportunity to kind of bring performance up to that level and then kind of continue beyond that to really deliver that kind of unstoppable Atlas that we know is within our grasp.
Nice, and it's good to see you've read the Atlas Way. I can hear some of those themes coming in already. Amanda, you've been in your current role a tiny bit longer, and you've been at the business a tiny bit longer than that. How many years now?
7.5.
7.5.
Yeah.
So how would you describe Atlas's culture today?
So I think it is a very positive, it's strong. We've got people with strong work ethics, people that really care, that take pride in their work. I think one of our challenges is because of our evolution. We bring people into our business who have come in with other cultures and we try and blend those cultures. And that's a real challenge. So for quite, certain periods of time, we run with subcultures that we're then trying to integrate, which is why it's so vitally important. And many of those cultures that come in are very aligned with ours in the first place. Hence, they were acquisition propositions. But nevertheless, we do things slightly differently. We have a different approach. So it's really, really important that we don't take our foot off the gas when it comes to making sure that our culture survives and continues to grow in the manner that we want it to.
So one of the things I'm interested in, and you talked a little bit about it at the beginning, Ben, was that I think we're a very culturally aware business. We know everyone in the business understands what we mean when we talk about culture. Performance as something that we articulate is much newer for us. So I'm guessing there must be some people out there who are thinking, well, are these two sides of the same coin, or are we going to degrade culture by chasing performance? And so in your mind, for both of you, I don't mind who answers first and we'll have a chat. Where do you see these things risking pulling against each other versus complementing each other? And how would you allay some of those fears?
So for me, I think we've got an opportunity, to make sure that we are more intentional about building those two things together. They're not opposing factors, as we've established. They are dependent, they're codependent, and one without the other doesn't work. And that's repeated quite clearly throughout the Atlas Way. We can't really sustain one without the other. As Chris says, have a good party and have a really nice time if we just continue to talk culture only. But without the performance element, we won't be here for long. So the party will soon be over. So yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's absolutely, I think, at the root of your question that there is a risk that culture is seen as good cult, performance as bad cult. And Amanda actually much more articulately and better than I often talks about, and these are not opposing factors, that are absolutely complementary. And Chris, our CEO, talks about the fact that culture is the ground in which everything else grows. So to that extent, culture comes first and would always be our kind of leading factor at Atlas. And certainly, personally, that's what made Atlas a very attractive place to come and work. But as Amanda says, that needs to be underpinned by real clarity on what good looks like, what good performance is. How do we measure that? How do we drive it? How do we treat underperformance? How do we reward overperformance? And how do we use that as the driving force to be a business that's continually improving itself, continually improving for our colleagues, continually improving for our clients, and hopefully being a force for good in the sector, and really showing our competitors what excellent FM looks like. And so I think, to answer your question, I think they are absolutely complementary. I think there is a risk that we need to keep an eye on, and Amanda and all of us with kind of management and leadership responsibility across the business are guardians, and making sure that performance measurement doesn't become synonymous with the dilution of our help.
And I've heard a little bit of that actually since we've started to have those more direct performance conversations, or and to boost our culture. And so that's where the clarity around what culture actually is has had to start to prevail, because I think it's very easy to think that culture is the slogans on the wall, that it's just our values, but it's so much more than that. It's all about the decisions that are made on a Tuesday afternoon when it's boiling hot and you're under pressure. It's how we deal with those, what the conversations are, what we're not walking past, what we're prepared to deal with, the difficult conversations that we're prepared to have. That's the kindness element, that's the courage that has to underpin a positive and performance-led culture. And that's where I think there is a slight feeling of a shift in that. But I actually believe that once everyone gets used to speaking that way and they've really digested the Atlas Way, understand the conditions for success and everything else that is out there, that they will then get it, But we're here to have those conversations to help people take people on that journey.
Nice. Like, if you talked a little bit around things like clarity and priorities, responsibilities. So I'm really interested in what you think good actually looks like at Atlas right now, and whether it's clear enough.
I don't think it's clear enough. I think we've got some great artifacts starting to be kind of released en masse in the business. So our three primary artifacts, in my view, for clarity of what good looks like are the business plans, the divisional business plans, and those that kind of sit at functional level. And the role frameworks, I genuinely believe the role framework is the best articulation of a job, certainly of my job, that I've ever seen in my career. And a new artifact, so it would be kind of relatively new terminology for people, but something that we will start to see more of, a performance framework. So those three things together, our business plans kind of set out our vision, divisionally to what the success measures for that division and should be, and the projects that we're sort of delivering within that division to drive us forward. The role framework should articulate what your role in this is, so how you turn up every day, what you spend your time on, and at an individual level. And then the performance framework should really support those conversations around that this is our standard, which at Atlas unapologetically should be a little bit better than most. But we should have a standard, and we should have stretch beyond that standard to keep us moving forward as business, to be able to reward people who are genuinely delivering over and above the baseline standard, but also to keep that spirit of moving forward as an organisation, being a high-performing organisation that really is setting out to over succeed on the sector.
And I'm interested from your view, Amanda, because that's very much the kind of performance side of it. And there's always a risk then that people hear that and think, oh, this is going to be used to report, to control, to punish. But actually, there's another way of looking at this, right? As we often have over our cultural lens. So do you want to talk about that?
Without doubt. And, I can only really start with me, which is the thing that I seek the most in any role I've ever been in, is clarity. What is expected of me? How do I know if I'm doing well, if I'm not doing well? And actually, if I'm not, it's okay for someone to tell me, actually, you need to sharpen up here. You need to, because that's guidance, that's support. That's not, I always like to note the difference really between performance management, because I always think performance management's got a slightly negative connotation to it, whereas managing performance, which is what we're about, is something completely different. And for me, I like nothing better than to know what I need to do to get from A to B and B to C, and say, actually, you've done well, and we've got to give that clarity to our people. And I think that's the thing that's been lacking here. We haven't had the frameworks. We haven't, in some instances, even had job descriptions. So how do they know what good looks like, what's expected of them? So I actually think this is such a turning point for us. And, I feel that I would be chomping at the bit to grab that artifact and say, oh, and I am, by the way, I have been. So I really, really hope that just layers down. But I do think, we have a responsibility to take the time to explain that. We can't just shove something in someone's face and say, there you go, and not go through it with them and help them understand what it consists of and how it will be used and so on and so forth, and how they can get the best out of it.
And it's really important for me that people understand, exactly to Amanda's point, we need to take the time for the conversation so that people understand that whilst unapologetically we will talk about underperformance, but we will never be an organisation that doesn't support people who are genuinely trying to move themselves forward. So you can be at the bottom end of your performance scale. You will get all the support that you need from the organisation, from your manager, from your leaders to be moving forward. And that's absolutely what we want. These are, I talk about carrot, not stick artifacts. These are things, because how exciting will the word of Atlas be when we're all performing at the top end of that scale? What opportunities will be available to us at that point? Won't it be really exciting when we're having that conversation around, we're already at high performing, now what's next? We've got a journey to go on, and we absolutely will support people to get there. But there's two phases of that journey in my view. There's one to get us to steady state, where most of the business most of the time is performing at that kind of good standard. We're rewarding those performing over and above. But then when we get to that top end of that scale, and most of the business most of the time is a high performing entity, it super excites me that second phase of that journey is the what next, and I'm here for it, and I'm excited about where that's going to take us.
I have to say, on a personal level, as but someone with a team who have got role frameworks in place, they've already allowed us to have really good conversations around what support do you need for us to get you to where you want to be. What support do you need from me? What support do you need for the business and stuff like that? So I can absolutely see how they're going to unlock that high performance, but also, to coin a phrase, they're going to create happiness in the long term for colleagues as much as for customers and for the communities that we serve.
And I agree with that. And I think one of the important messages is, don't just assume same old, same old. If people that have been with Atlas a long time, come with new lenses, because we're in that transition phase where actually new lenses are required, and it's really super exciting. So that would be my sort of message is don't just assume, well, maybe I haven't had support before, or I haven't this, or we haven't had these tools in place really to be able to propel and have those meaningful conversations.
One of the things that people would definitely have noticed, certainly people who have been at Atlas for a while, Atlas traditionally has not been the most structured of businesses. We've been fairly organic, pretty laissez-faire. we're definitely seeing more structure come in now. In your opinions, what's the difference between structure that actually helps and supports people versus structure that just adds noise and pain to people's life?
So for me, I think so. One of the things I've heard lots is, we're growing, we're going to turn into a corporate machine, we're, just going to become another alternative FM business. It's really important to understand that actually having the structure is just the facilitator. Having structure around us helps us facilitate and move things forward. It doesn't mean we lose our heart. It doesn't mean we lose who we are, because that's about the people, right? But a business of this size can't continue to grow, and we're creaking and our people are creaking. And so when we're putting structure in, rather than be fearful maybe of the change, for me it's let's grab hold of that and embrace it, because that's the thing that's actually going to give us time back. It's going to allow us to have some bandwidth to think, to strategize, to plan, to get out and see our people, to make that phone call to that frontline worker. That's for me what the structure is here for.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts. I talk a lot about outcomes versus outputs. So I think a structure is an output. It's a thing that we need to deliver against, but it's nothing to us as a business unless we do the so what, so the outcome. So what is that structure giving us? So the differentiator for me is, does that deliver a thing that is driving us forward as a business? And if it doesn't, we should be challenging ourselves about why we're doing it. And one of the really early things that we did, not long after I joined as a kind of management team, we're still on the journey, but we've stripped back the number of KPIs, metrics that we look at as business. When I joined, it was, in the hundreds. We've tried at the most senior level of our business to look we're now at about 12. It's a phenomenal journey that we've been on. 12 key metrics that really give us the kind of indicator of the health of the business. And we're not there yet in terms of the outcome. That's still an output in my view. So it's a step in the right direction. Measuring it itself isn't enough. We've got to drive insight from the measurement, and we've got to drive action from the insight. So, and it's not until we get to that last bit that we're really delivering the outputs the outcomes of where we want to take business. So I think, we should all be challenging ourselves. Are we doing this with a clarity on what the outcome is of this? If we haven't got it, then let's create that clarity, and let's make sure we're talking about that as the artifact. We're doing this because it gives us this, because I genuinely think people, galvanize around a kind of real clear end goal.
Nice. Now, we are very lucky we have people from right across the business and beyond who can listen to this podcast, so don't get too nervous. But if there was one everyday behaviour that if we go right everywhere, what would it be to change things the fastest, or hopefully the fastest, I guess, in the best way?
Sorry, I do. I will start, because I think my hope is that we really instill as a business, and that we remain kind on people, but we are tough on issues and outcomes. I think if we maintain that, that's brilliant. There's and I always get it the wrong way around. There's that kind of conversation that's quite in the zeitgeist at the moment about kindness and niceness, and is it kind to be direct to someone, or is that just nice? And I get those the wrong way around. But as I say, if you are tough on an issue but kind on the person, I think you're doing quite a lot. We will miss deadlines throughout the course. We will miss metrics. We will miss targets, and that's okay. And we should be absolutely kind on the individuals that are involved in those processes. But we still need to be, okay, so what are we doing about it? Let's not stop at that kind of kindness of, oh, we didn't get it, never mind. Let's go on to the point of what plans are we putting in place? What actions and activities are going to drive us to the point where that's better next time? And so I'd love to see that kind of absorbed, tap on the issue, kind on the person.
Niceness and kindness is my obsession, which people all know.
So you got traders made.
So yeah, so niceness would be the hug and the cup of tea. And
avoiding the question.
Making someone feel better in the moment, but then walking away. The kindness, I think, is having the courage to sit with them, work out what it is they need to do next, and then stay with them through the journey to make sure that happens. That's how I differentiate the two, as a passionate advocate of kindness in the workplace. Over to you.
For me, so I'll look at it through a slightly different lens then. I think you've come at it from sort of us managing, our teams, our people and that. For me, I suppose as an individual, so as a person, no matter what my role is, what I do for the business, just that pause. If we just had a pause moment, because we are 24/7 and reactive so much, we just don't take that time to think, to sometimes reset. It might be a slightly longer pause just to reset and be kind to ourselves. But just to give ourselves a couple of minutes thinking space before we make a decision, because that way we know we've evaluated the impact of what we're doing. We give ourselves the opportunity to think, actually, who else needs this information? There's lots of things that I think just that pause could feed and underpin for us.
And the two are so heavily interlinked, right? You can't get from the output to the outcome without having a moment of reflection to find out what that insight is that you're then going to act on, right? And so I agree with you. We are a very fast-moving business. We're full of brilliant doers.
Yeah.
I think all of us could do with just stopping every now and again and reflecting on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So let's step back for the last question, and as we kind of come to a close, where do you think the biggest opportunity for Abbas is right
Well, I think the journey that we're on with the Atlas Way, the conditions for success, I think the biggest opportunity is to embed that every layer within the business so that everyone is looking through the same lens. I know that's a mammoth task, right? There's a big ask. But I think if we can get ourselves to a place where that's known and understood, it will then make all of the performance conversations, the driving of the business forward, just so straightforward. So, there's nothing contentious there. We're a high performance business. We put high expectations and we're all high-fiving and we're celebrating the success together. But it's okay to also have those conversations where I say, we messed up here. Let's get and fix that and get up again and move on again. So I think, for me, I think it is just obviously from a cultural perspective, embedding that in so that people do understand they're part of something quite special.
Mine's very similar, actually. I think it's almost a double down for me on where we've been, the journey that we're already on. So, leading with happiness, creating happiness is such a great opportunity for us, I think. As a sector that's very heavily commoditized, as a sector that really relies on our frontline colleagues to deliver, I think actually if we're leading with happiness, that is the absolute opportunity. Happy colleagues equals happy clients equals profitable business. Profitable business means more investment in people. More investment with people means happy colleagues. And so the kind of positive flywheel can continue. I think we've got it. We now need to underpin it. We need to get the level beneath it and say, okay, well, what does happiness look like? Where's the clarity on what your role in that kind of purpose is, and really pushing that forward. So I think our opportunity is already defined. I just think we need to kind of push on and make sure it's supported at every level of the organisation to deliver against.
Love it. Thank you both. Now, if people want to find out more about this, I know we're aware that most people would have heard about the business plans. Not everyone would have heard about things like role frameworks, and certainly not performance frameworks. Get in touch with you two, right? And you'll be very excited to hear from people around and people who just want to get more involved in this part of the business, right? Because it's so fundamental to all of us. A huge thank you. I know you both got to run off to meetings. I've got to run off to another meeting too. This podcast has got its name. But thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll catch up with both again soon.
Thanks. Great fun. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Boris.